So I was going to try and do a interesting introduction today, but I just, I'm not feeling it. But either way, this episode is just basically me installing these giant 14-inch shocks on the front of my K10 project. The front has 52s on it, and the 12s that I had on there were kind of at a shitty angle, and they just weren't enough to allow what those 52s could allow the front end to flex out to. So after doing some basic math and flexing this thing out or whatever, I realized that I can easily put a 14 in there. And yeah, that's the topic of today. We're going to put a 14-inch shallow shock in the front end of my K10 square body. This is the shock tower from DIY4x4. You get a pair of them. They're about 150 bucks each, or 150 bucks for the pair, I should say. And pretty beefy. These are 4 square bodies, so. And these tabs are DIY60 C shock mount tabs from Ruffstuff. I don't remember how much they were, but they're not too expensive. Nice big thick 1/4-inch tabs. They fit over the inner C right here, and then you obviously mount your shock into them. The shocks I'm running today, these are the 14-inch Bilstein 5125s. These are the same shocks I have in the rear of the truck. But, yep, 14-inch shocks. That's just an idea of the parts we're putting in. Alright, so here's my current setup. That is a 12-inch Bilstein shock on an F250 shock tower. That's got to go. Doesn't fit right. As you can see, it's got to be spaced out from the frame anyway. And that's the stock lower mount on a DIY60. So I'm going to cut that off. Now I'm going to pull all this stuff out. And then I will knock these bump stops off because 1, they're not lined up, and 2, they are in the way. And we'll start getting everything mocked up. Alright, so now that we have all of the front shock stuff off of the truck, it's time to bust out the hot knife. An air hammer, get those out, no problem. Pretty much just got to do the same thing for the other side and we're done. Here's the shock tower set in place. So once we get that mounted up, it'll be time to start welding on the lower tabs. Honestly, I think for these I might just put 2 bolts in it for now. Maybe tack weld the top edge here. I'll show you. Maybe tack weld this top edge in place. Well, not tack weld it, but put a bead there. Maybe put a bead there. Just in case I ever need to remove these shock towers to get the motor out or something. I doubt I'll need to, but we'll see. Who knows? Down the road I might just cut the whole front of the frame off, but yeah, I think for now, I think that's going to be a good idea. We'll just run a couple bolts in the front side there, and then I'll just put a couple welds up top, and that should be more than enough to support a single shock. Why, thank you. Cheers. Good stuff. Alright, did most of the terrible work, like the drilling the holes in the frame and grinding off all the old slag and everything else from the axles. 2 new holes right there in the frame. Got the axle housings cleaned up. So I'll probably hit these with a flap disc, obviously, before I decide to weld the tabs on, but yep. And then tomorrow I gotta go down to the hardware store and get some 1/2-inch bolts, and I think I have enough paint. Yeah, I should have enough paint. We'll find out when we find out, right? Yep, had enough paint. So I gave these a good coat for the night while I wait to get bolts in the morning. And yeah, I taped them off, so I got at least get the weld onto them. But that's where we're at. So on to the next thing. So while I'm waiting for the paint to dry, I'm going to replace these two pigtail leads that I have on my alternator. This was just temporary because the old pigtail was shit. So I ordered a replacement from AC Delco. So that's what we're going to do real quick now. Went and got my bolts this morning and bolted that on. And the shock is now mocked up in place. That's where our tabs are at. See how they go on there. And we've got just about 6 inches of up travel to bottom out here, which should be perfect because I will bump it at probably 5 inches. So it won't go any farther than about 5 or so. But I still have about 3/4 of an inch past that still if I absolutely crush the living shit out of the bump stop. But that's where we're at. I gotta cut some spacers. When you buy the shock towers, they include the upper bolts and they include a piece of DOM tube to use as spacers for your shock up top. So I gotta cut that to fill in the space around the shock there at the top. And I gotta weld these lower brackets on real quick, and then this whole project will be done. Towers are in, shocks are in. Giant mess all over the floor in the shop. That's the passenger side. So pretty easy install to do. The heater hose here rubs on the shock tower, so I used an old piece of radiator hose and just wrapped it around there for now because, I mean, that's really all it takes. On the driver's side, I did have to move the brake lines. Little custom bend action there, and then I had to take the clamp out on the bottom. I'll finish that stuff. That's all just finicky bullshit at this point anyway, so. But plenty of room, get my finger in there. Not super tight on the driver's side towards the headers. I don't know if I'll be able to get that in the shot. But on the passenger side, it's pretty tight. I mean, maybe 1/8 of an inch of clearance at the header right there. Should be fine. If it hits, I'll just trim it with a cutoff wheel or something. But yeah, so one more thing crossed off the list on this project. At this point in time, let's see. The shocks are done, so we don't have to deal with them anymore, and that's a relief because honestly, I am just done with shocks. I didn't want to screw around with shocks anymore. I've spent enough time on them. But yeah, I mean, with that being out of the way, the big project coming up is going to be a re-gear on the differentials. Bunch of parts. We got the 488 thick cut gears for the front because my Yukon locker is a 3 series, so it's a 410 down carrier. It was local and it was a lot cheaper, so I bought it because it was a deal and it was way cheaper than buying a brand new one. And then we've got master install kits for the rear and the front. There's 2 of them right there. And then I have the Spicer gears. I think they're in this box. The rear is getting Spicer OE 488s to go on the spool. So once the spool shows up, I can start on that. Oh, and lube lockers too. Bingo, lube locker. I've got a stack of parts over here too. So got diff covers. These are DIY diff covers. Beefy, heavy duty, those are going on when I do the re-gear. So this thing will be re-geared to 488, and I will probably take it down to the DMV and see if I can't get it registered, because it hasn't been registered in 6 years, I think. I'll probably re-gear it before I do the registration. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely going to be another set of videos. I'll probably do a separate video for each one, just because trying to do a video on both ends would be a pain in the ass. So thanks for watching again. Hope you guys have a good day. And I'll catch you in the next one. All right, later.
Take it from Larry the Crime Donkey. Don't be a sucker.